Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special call meeting of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners. Today is May 7th, 2021, and it's approximately 10:10 a.m. Madam Clerk, please call the roll of the Board of Commissioners.
Chairman Rob Pitts.
Present.
Commissioner Liz Hausman.
Present.
Commissioner Bob Ellis.
Present.
Commissioner Lee Morris.
Present.
Vice Chair Natalie Hall.
Present.
Commissioner Marvin Arrington Jr. Commissioner Khadijah Abdul Rahman. Chairman, you have a quorum.
All right, would you call the roll for the mayors, please?
City of Alpharetta, Mayor Gilvin.
Present.
City of Atlanta, Mayor Bottoms. Chattahoochee Hills, Mayor Reed.
Present.
College Park, Mayor Motley Broom.
Present.
Point, Mayor Holiday Ingram.
Here.
Fairburn, Mayor Carhurst.
Present.
Hateville, Mayor Hallman. Johns Creek, Mayor Bodker.
Here.
Milton, Mayor Lockwood. Mountain Park, Mayor Steele. Palmetto, Mayor Bodie.
Present.
Roswell, Mayor Henry.
Matt Judy, Mayor Pro Tem, here for Mayor Henry.
Sandy Springs, Mayor Paul.
Present.
South Fulton, Mayor Edwards. Union City, Mayor Williams.
Here. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. 10. All right, you have the agenda before us with no objections, and we will proceed as outlined on the printed agenda. First item up will be a T-Splosh updates, cities and counties. Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir. Good morning, mayors and commissioners. We have David Clark, our Public Works Director, that's going to do a brief overview that was prepared for the last meeting that John Orr from ARC was here. It's more around ARC coordination support. John is unavailable today, but David will handle that. And we've gotten the funding scenarios from GSU. So David, if you are available to lead us through that, I would appreciate it.
Good afternoon, everybody. David Clark, Public Works Director here. Is it possible to share my screen?
You do?
Yeah.
It's this one.
All right, thank you. The two things I wanted to make the mayor's aware of is, first of all, the interaction that staff has had with ARC and John Orr in particular. He has a MPO meeting this morning, wasn't able to join us. But if you remember, there's been some questions about what role and what assistance ARC can offer in developing and managing the T-Splosh projects. Working with him, we're all familiar with this timeline that we're working on. We had a very successful meeting with the public works directors for each of the cities last Thursday. We reviewed this. I know that all of the cities now are actively working on their project lists, and a number of them are actually starting to have public meetings to finalize those lists. So it looks like the June 15th deadline is going to be able to be made by everybody, which will then allow us to work on the IGA to be done in July, and then the formal board resolution in August, and still have the election in November, just as we've kind of outlined on this chart and talked about in the past. As it relates to ARC, they're going to be relying on two documents to help work with the individual cities. Last fall, they revised and updated the comprehensive transportation plan for the South Fulton area. And so that's where they'll be looking for most of the South Fulton cities to coordinate some of their projects from. Not all of them need to come from the C2P, but they're certainly looking for some assistance or some coordination between what the cities are proposing and this document. Likewise, about 2 years ago in 2018, they did a similar comprehensive transportation plan for North Fulton and they'll be looking for the North Fulton cities to draw some of their projects out of that. So those are the two planning documents that ARC will be using in their assistance with both Fulton County and the individual cities. So there was the update from ARC. Is there any questions on that before I go to some of the funding information?
Continue, Mr. Clark.
Okay, hearing none. We've been working, the Fulton County's been working with Georgia State over the last month in revising their projections of what they believe T-SPLOST would bring in between April 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2027. And initially, when we first started working with them about 6 months ago, they were recommending about a $525 million program based on really how well the metro area in particular is coming out of COVID. They have upgraded their projections for the 5-year window to be $554 million. Now that's not all going to be able to use for T-SPLOST because there are two expenses that come out of that chart, or out of that number that I've reflected here on the chart. The Department of Revenue gets 1% of the money that is collected for their administration fee, or that's going to be a little over $5 million we expect. And then Fulton County gets 0.5% for our program management fee. So that's going to be a little over $2 million. So that will leave almost $546 million for all the cities to share based on population. And this is what we're recommending everybody develop their programs on. This information was also shared with each of your public works directors last week. What we show here on the charts, and this was attached to the agenda that was sent out to you earlier this week. Unfortunately, we still don't have the 2020 census information. We're still optimistic that we'll get that before the IGA are developed. But the best information that the census can share with us right now is their estimates that they prepared in 2019. And so you can kind of see the population estimates for all of the cities outside of the city of Atlanta in this column, and then the representative population based on the 2019 estimates. Based on those population percentages, here is the amount of money that we're expecting each city to get, assuming 100% collections, which obviously, if history is any indication, we did not reach that as part of the first T-SPLOST that we're in now, but we addressed that by having 3 different tiers. And we're suggesting that we still do the same tier method. So tier 1 would be up to 85% of the collections. Tier 2 would be 86 to 100%. And then tier 3, in case things continue going really well and we actually collect more money, have 101 to 115%. So for each city here, we have given the different tier numbers to the public works directors, and they're developing their projects based on that different levels of collection. This final column here is what we're expecting everybody to have collected by March 31st of 2022, mainly just to give you an idea of how much money you're getting in this T-SPLOST and comparing that to the increases that you'll be getting following the revised 2022 to 27 projections. So that's all we had really prepared for presentation today. We'll certainly entertain any questions, but like I said, we had a very productive meeting with the public works directors last week. And I certainly appreciate all of the work that they're putting in developing these project lists using the most recent T-SPLOST projections that we have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clark. That's pretty straightforward. Any questions? Any comments? All right, moving ahead. Item number 2, Mr. Manager.
Item number 2, we want to provide an update to the mayors. This is a presentation that was made to the Board of Commissioners on Wednesday. And by the way, that is the kind of rationale for the timing of your receipt of these next 2 items. This is information first shared with the board in their Wednesday meeting and then shared on this Friday. But Rick Barron, the elections director, is prepared to talk about both reflections on 2021, particularly from a financial standpoint, and then going forward view relative to financial requirements, as well as an item that had been noted, which was the maintenance of the voter rolls. So, Mr. Chairman, Rick is here to discuss that.
Mr. Barron, you have the floor.
Greg, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. And I've got a presentation here. Next slide, please. So this is a look back at 2020 events that impacted the 2020-2021 election cycle. We had a new and resource-intensive voting system that was purchased by the state of Georgia. We had an increase in absentee by mail voting of more than 500% due to the COVID pandemic. We had 2 unbudgeted elections in September and December, a rare federal runoff in January of 2021. Early voting sites increased by more than 30% during the August to January part of the year over 2016, a full hand audit of November's ballots, a machine recount of November's ballots. We had a 25% increase in polling locations over 2016. We had rental payments to Georgia World Congress Center. We had to add security and technicians to all polling places for early voting on election day. And then we had a COVID outbreak of 26 staff members in October leading up to the November election, 34 total for the year. Next slide, please. So our past election costs in even numbered years, you can see here, for example, the 2008 election cycle, we had 6 early voting sites, 264 election day sites, and we had an $11.1 million expenditure that year. And 2012, it was 6 early voting sites, 259 election day sites, the budget is $6.1 million. And 2016 was similar to 2008, although we had more early voting, but fewer election day sites. You see that 2020 jumps up. There were many factors that I talked about on the previous page, why the costs increased in 2020. We had 34 early voting sites, and we also had 255 election day sites. The budget increased to 38.3 million. Part of that was due to COVID. Part of that was due to the new voting system is much more resource intensive and costly than the previous system that we had. And then in 2021, for the January election, the budget was 6.1 million. Other counties, I've confirmed with Forsyth, Gwinnett, Spalding, Athens, Clark, Rockdale, Clayton, and Muskogee counties that they saw similar increases in their 2020 budgets versus previous years, the same as we saw here in Fulton. We are looking at the municipal election in the fall along with the T-SPLOST of a budget of $7.1 million. This is a big increase over previous municipal elections. That's with 24 early voting sites, 271 election day sites. The reason we're increasing the election day sites is we have 16 precincts that still have over 5,000 registered voters. The budget for the 2021 runoff would be $2.46 per registered voter. For the municipalities, it's $2.96 per registered voters for the municipal election in November. And then you can see that the costs for the elections next year are going up significantly, and for not only for the general primary, but the general primary runoff, the general election, and the potential general election runoff, which if we increase the early voting sites to the same as the general election, that general election runoff will probably inch up closer to the general election costs. But we are seeing election costs now for these elections that one election costs as much as it did almost for an entire election year before. And a lot of that has to do with the new voting system. Next slide, please.
Before you go on, Mr. Barron,
Uh-huh.
Mr. Chairman, can you take questions now?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Barron, you pointed out the other counties in the metro area and said that they had similar increase in election costs. Do you happen to know how those counties charge their municipalities for municipal elections?
I don't know.
Would it surprise you to learn that they charge significantly less than Fulton does?
I have never spoken to other counties about how they charge those. I mean, this is the costs are based on the 2019 resolution by the Board of Commissioners, and so that's how we charge the counties or charge the municipalities. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Mr. Barker, Mayor Barker,
Yes.
is there any reason, you got any facts supporting what you just stated, that could significantly increase our cost, decrease?
It's not a matter of decreasing our costs. It's how the county chooses to share the costs. I'm not questioning whether the county incurs the costs they're suggesting they incur. It's how they choose to treat the municipalities in terms of the sharing of those costs.
Thank you, sir. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barron.
Okay, so the reasons for election cost increases are the increase in early voting sites, increase in the number of election day precincts, additional staffing needs, additional equipment needs for early voting sites and election day sites. One thing that we have to do is make sure that we have now, need equipment for specifically for election day, specifically for early voting, and specifically for training the way the system works. So we received a certain allotment from the state, but we have to purchase more. And part of those purchases happened last year. Increased voter turnout, unknown factors that could impact costs going forward. We are unsure how absentee voting habits will change once, if we get into the post-pandemic period, and with the impact of Senate Bill 202 on when we can mail absentee ballots. The changes in absentee regulations could drive more citizens to early voting. Requests from elderly and disabled citizens, we're unsure how Senate Bill 202 is going to impact them. At the beginning of each year, we used to mail out absentee ballot applications to all 65 and older residents, as well as those that are disabled, but we're prohibited from doing so going forward. Voter turnout, that varies from year to year and election to election. Next slide, please.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor Edwards, you have the floor.
Yeah, let me ask a question. You know, you made some statements about the equipment and things of that nature, the advancement of the equipment. When we have issues at the voting precincts where, I don't know, equipment goes down or whatever the case may be, is that an added cost to what we got now? And if it is, what would that cost be on that budget?
Well, what we make sure now that we have a technician in each polling site. So it's the hourly rate for a technician to be there all day. And that's something that with the previous voting system, we used to have roving teams that would, so there were fewer personnel in the field. Now we've got a person that's dedicated at each site because there are many more components to this system. You not only have the touch screens, but you have printers, you have scanners, you have iPads. So there are multiple components in the field during early voting. And then you add a laptop into that with all the connections that happen, and more printers during early voting than you have on election day. So we definitely need these technicians. Generally, the technicians are about $25 per hour. And for an election day or during early voting, to have one there during the entire period of early voting, it gets to be costly. And because of the environment last year, we ended up having security at each one of those locations as well. And that has increased the costs that we have to operate all the polling sites in addition.
You said one per voting precinct. Is there any time, based on the population of voting, you have more than one in one particular place or one particular municipality?
Well, no, usually each polling site has its own technician, and that suffices for some of the bigger sites. Like, for example, Mercedes-Benz last year, we usually during early voting had 5 technicians at either Mercedes-Benz or at State Farm Arena.
Okay.
Because of the number of units that were assigned there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barron.
You're welcome.
Continue, Mr. Barron.
Okay, so we are focused going forward on implementation of a post-election assessment that our office and the county executive management team came up with post-election assessment recommendations for the Board of Registration and Elections. We had a work session with the Board of Registration and Elections earlier this week, and we're working on implementing all of those recommendations, developed detailed project plans, expanding early voting sites going forward, even more than in 2020, expanding locations and opportunities for citizens to obtain a voter ID, retooling our poll worker training. Senate Bill 202 is going to bring many changes to what is the demands on poll workers. We're going to be developing a robust voter education and outreach communication plan. We'll be retooling our buses, our mobile voting buses that we used last year around the county. We distributed those according to Commissioner Precinct, and those have been prohibited going forward. So we're going to use those as part of our voter education and outreach plan. We'll be updating our standard operating procedures to comply with Senate Bill 202. We'll conduct weekly internal work group meetings with county manager's executive team. And then we continue to do our monthly reporting to the Board of Registration and Elections. Next slide, please. We have the municipal election on November 2nd with the runoff for those municipalities that have runoffs on November 30th. My elections chief, Nadine Williams, has been in touch many times with the city clerks this year with regard to the election. We have revised municipal election budgets and those were sent on March 15th. We have 28 early voting sites to be approved, but we're probably going to reduce that to 24. We'll be working with the city clerks going forward to get input on the early voting sites throughout the county. And then we'll be increasing election day sites from 255 to 271. Some staff will begin reporting on June 6th. The remainder, it'll be in August. Absentee ballot applications can be received now only 78 days prior to the election instead of 6 months as before. If there are overseas ballots, they can still be mailed 45 days prior to an election, although the remainder of the ballots can't be mailed out until 30 days before an election. That with that 30-day period, we anticipate that people that apply for an absentee by mail, if they don't receive it by the time early voting comes, many of those voters will end up canceling those absentee ballot applications at the early voting sites going forward with that window that Senate Bill 202 put in place. But the last day to mail absentee ballots is 11 days prior to an election. And what that does is it enables us to get applications and then to have time to mail those ballots out for voters to get them back. So that deadline that was in Senate Bill 202 should help the process of voters getting their ballots going forward. We'll be reducing our drop boxes from 38 down to 8. Those can only be located in early voting sites, and they can only be open during early voting hours going forward. So by August, we'll have removed all of our ballot drop boxes. We used to have a drop box for 90% of Fulton County all the voters lived within 3 miles, or 90% of the voters lived within 3 miles of a drop box when we had 38. And so we're going to make recommendations to the Board of Registration and Elections where to place those 8 locations strategically through the county to make them convenient for voters. We're working on with the External Affairs on messaging to voters for the changes that Senate Bill 202 is how that will impact voters going forward. We'll begin that voter education and outreach in June. The voter education will include absentee ballot deadlines, voter ID submission requirements, absentee ballot drop box locations, provisional voting changes, the mobile voting units. We are, as I mentioned earlier, we're repurposing those, and we'll use those to provide voter identification, provide voter demonstrations, provide copies of absentee applications. We can also use them at events to recruit poll workers. We usually get about 150 people per month that apply for voter identification, that we provide voter identification to here in our offices at the county. The mobile units will help get out to the community to provide more voter ID. Next slide, please.
Mr. Chair, this is Mayor Carhurst. I have a question.
Yes, you have the floor, Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask a question concerning the provisional voting changes. Could you elaborate on that just a little bit for me? Because the last election, we did have a lot of folks that came in and did a provisional ballot, and there still was some issues with them casting their vote. So can you give me a little explanation of what changes were done with the provisional voting?
Sure. Now, if someone votes out of precinct, if they're assigned to precinct 01A and they show up at 04B, if it's before 5 o'clock, HAVA still requires that a provisional ballot be offered to the voter. However, if they cast that provisional ballot in the incorrect precinct before 5 o'clock, that ballot will not count. They need to go, so they will be encouraged to go to their assigned polling place on election day. So the advantage of early voting is that you can vote anywhere. So we want to make sure that people take advantage of early voting so that they can go anywhere to vote. If you vote on election day from now on, and if you vote between 7 a.m. and 4:59 p.m. and you vote a provisional ballot and you're out of precinct, your ballot will not count. After 5 p.m., voters, if they show up in the incorrect precinct, the ballot will count. So that's the major change going forward.
Okay, thank you so much.
Well,
Continue, Mr. Barron.
next slide, please. So Senate Bill 202, it has some updates with regard to challenging voters. Anyone can, there's no limit on the number of people whose voting qualifications one person can challenge. We have to hold a hearing within 10 business days after a challenge is filed with the Board of Registration and Elections, and that we must set a date, time, and place of a hearing and notify the challenger and the challenged of when that hearing will take place. Sanctions can be issued by the State Elections Board for failure to comply with those changes. The Secretary of State is required to participate in an out-of-state residency database. Right now, the state has a membership with ERIC, so that they can verify from certain states if someone has registered to vote in another state. Secretary of State's required to do cross-check database for list maintenance as well. There's something that's been out there since 2013, which is a Kansas cross-check. The thing about this is that none of the voter registration databases between the states are integrated. So we have to rely on other states notifying us. And even if another state notifies us that they might have a match, we have to confirm that voter, we can't just remove a voter because of National Voter Registration Act. So if we're notified by another state that they might have a match, And we can't verify, we have to be able to verify that that voter registered after they registered here. If they registered here and they have a registration in Florida, but the registration here took place afterwards, then we can't remove the voter off of our rolls. The other state would then have to remove them from their rolls. And whatever their process is for that would happen. If we can confirm that a voter that registered to vote in the other state first, and then we can confirm that it is a matching voter, then we can begin a challenge process to remove that voter from the rolls. There's lots of voter roll maintenance that happens on a regular basis. Non-citizens, we maintain those daily. There's a dashboard that the Secretary of State has. They monitor this, every county's dashboards. The non-citizens are maintained daily. If the vital records, we get notifications from vital records of people that have died. We also do an additional step, and we go through the obituaries as well to make not only to confirm vital records, but to do our own due diligence to make sure that we remove people from the rolls. Anyone that has been ruled by a judge to be mentally incompetent, we handle those immediately as soon as we're notified. Transfers in and out of the county, those are maintained daily. We get those notifications from the state. Confirmation process. If the confirmation process can happen for a few reasons. One is the national change of address. The United States Postal Service, and periodically the state will get a list from the USPS and bounce that against the voter rolls. And what they do is they make sure that the people that have moved are either moved from active status to inactive status, or we update their address if it's within the county. If there's no activity, which a voter doesn't vote for 2 general election cycles, and they're an active voter, if they do not vote, then we will send out a confirmation. If they do not respond to the confirmation, then they will go from active to inactive status. Then there are other cycles that happen before, when they're inactive, before they can be removed from the rolls. There are long timelines that allow that voter that's in inactive status to be able to vote, and it's usually an 8 to 10 year process. The registration, also, if we mail something to voters, we get mail back then, and we get that piece of mail back. We then send a confirmation to make sure that that voter does not live there. If that voter does not live there, they're an active voter, then we move them into inactive status because we are unaware of where their current address is. And then they can also, at that point, then they'll eventually move off the rolls from inactive to canceled. The voter registration card applications, those are maintained daily. They go through an overnight process where the Secretary of State's office verifies those voters after we do the data entry. Challenged voters, that's the process above. Anyone can challenge the qualifications of any voters. Felons, we maintain those monthly. We have to send letters out to hold hearings on those. The Department of Corrections sends a list to the Secretary of State's office. They then scrub that against the voter registration database and make sure that then we have to send out letters notifying them that we will be removing them from the voter rolls. And then we send out, in the municipal election years, we send out a voter list to each of the municipalities for them to verify their voter rolls. That is sent by the registration chief as well, and the elections chief lets them know in the timeline what that timeline is to respond to that municipal voter verification. I think that's all I have on the voter roll maintenance for the moment. It is National Voter Registration Act. It does govern a lot of things that the states can do for removing voters. And so the state we have to maintain compliance with that federal law, or each state does. And so that governs a lot of the voter roll maintenance as well. The state monitors each county's database to make sure that the work is done. And then we do all of that maintenance about which I just spoke. Next slide, please. And then if you have any questions, I can take those now.
Are there questions for Mr. Barron? Any questions for Mr. Barron? Anyone?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Gilvin from Alpharetta.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, you have the floor.
Sir, and I do appreciate the efforts that our team at the county has put into answering a lot of these questions. You know, there's been a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation over the past 12 months. So I appreciate the effort you're making to clear this up. None of us want to have an embarrassing election in November, I'm sure, especially those of us on a municipal level where the vote counts are a lot smaller in numbers. And for example, the city of Alpharetta had a race about 8 years ago that was determined by 7 votes. And so it's important to make sure we get it right when you're talking about numbers like that. I just wanted to clarify and make sure I understood. So if Mr. Barron was right, if I heard Mr. Barron right, he said that inactive voter rolls can take 8 to 10 years to clear up. And I understand that's because of a lot of different regulations and for good reason. We do not want to remove people from the voter rolls that should be able to vote. That's the last thing any of us want to do. But on a local level, for those of us that are being charged by voters on these rolls, if there's, you know, several hundred or thousand active voters listed on our voter rolls who moved out of state, you know, 7, 8 years ago, not only are we paying extra money, but it's causing a lot of issues. So I just wanted to clarify, is that accurate? Are there potentially people that have been moved away from our cities for 7, 8, 10 years, and we don't really have any way to change that?
Well, what we do is we send confirmation letters if we get something back. Now, if a voter gives us information that they've registered in another state, we can remove them if we get that permission from the voter or notification from the voter himself or herself. It does take a long time. If a voter doesn't vote, or if there's some reason that they go from active to inactive, that is a long process for someone to have no contact or have a change in address. In February of 2016, Department of Driver Services made a change to the way they do when someone comes into the Department of Driver Services, that voter, anything that a citizen would do would generate an application to us. What we saw from that is that not only did our voter registration numbers go way up because it generated, a lot of people used to have to opt in. So now it became an opt-out process. The voter registration numbers went way up since February of 2016. What it did was it also reduced the number of inactive voters. Our inactive voter count compared to our active voter count is the lowest it's ever been in history. So in essence, because of that DDS change and because of online voter registration, which was instituted when Secretary Kemp was the Secretary of State, that made it easier for the counties to ensure that their voter rolls were the most accurate that they've ever been. We have almost 860,000 registered voters. About almost 38,000 of those are inactive voters. Now, if we have a national change of address this year, if the state goes ahead with that process, the last time they did national change of address, we saw about 40,000 people drop off our rolls. Some of those are going to be off the inactive and some of those are going to be off the active. So once the state does that this year, if they do it, they aren't required by law to do it, but usually they do it in odd numbered years, you will see the voter registration numbers drop. And that is usually a time, that's why it's good that they bounce the USPS change of address against the voter rolls, but it's usually done every 2 years. And I know there's question about what our voting age population is versus how our voter registration totals. Our voting age population by a 2018 or 19 estimate, I think, was somewhere in the neighborhood of the upper 850,000 range. We have about 860,000 voters. About 38,000 of those are inactive. That means we don't know where those voters are. But it takes, because of federal law and how the state has to comply with those, we can't just remove those voters. If there's evidence that those voters have moved and somebody wants to challenge them, then we can do that. We also have a high homeless population here in Fulton County. We get about 150 people a month, 100 to 150 people a month that come into our office that are homeless, that register. They get a voter ID. They use that voter ID for all sorts of identification at other state agencies. They provide what they need to provide to get that ID. Some of them are registered at the courthouse across the street. Some are registered at, also, for example, they can register at addresses that aren't, for example, under a freeway. They can register by saying where they have their tent. They can also register at homeless shelters. So we have a high homeless population in Fulton County that some of the other counties around the state don't have. And that is another reason our rolls may be higher. But some of those homeless people can then also take a while. If they don't vote, they go in that no activity status, and it takes a while for them to come off the rolls as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
let me pose a question if I may.
Yes, sir.
And I just need you to check something for me because I have no firsthand knowledge. But one of the poll workers informed me that my predecessor, Eva Galambos, who died about 5 years ago, showed up on the voter rolls this year. I know you're trying to, if you're actually removing dead people, it seems like she would be off. But you should check and make sure that at least.
For some reason, that name sounds familiar to me, and I almost think that somebody contacted us about that name last year. So
if somebody that high profile died 5 years ago and they're still on the voter rolls, that leaves me a little concerned about the effectiveness of your obituary reading.
Well, if the obituary, we try to diligently go through those obituaries. That's not required by law. We do that as
I understand, but that was front page.
Okay. Well, we can check the name. What happens as well, and I can tell you this, there are third-party groups out there that get lists. Some of them are very old. They send letters to people, and those lists do not come from our voter rolls. If a third-party group goes out there and they buy an old list that has people from years ago, and they don't download a new list from the state, and they mail things to voters that are out there. Those mailings are not coming from us, and those lists are not coming from us.
But I would assume somebody working the election would not go out and buy a third-party list.
We don't.
Mr. Barron,
Yes.
just check that one, please.
Yeah. If I can get,
That's who she is.
we can get the name.
All right, thank you. Further questions? Cool.
Mr. Barron.
Vice Chair Hall, followed by Mayor Bodker.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm sure that, you probably need a lot of staff and a lot of access to catch every obituary. But my main concern would be, are the dead actually voting? Because I'm from Chicago, where there was a time when the dead people were actually voting. So my question is, have we had any of those concerns? Do we have any information about whether there are actually dead people who have voted?
We were asked about it was either 2 or 3 specific people last year that were alleged to have voted that were dead, and none of the people on the list that we received had voted. That is all that I know from last year. There were 3 people, I believe it was in the November election, that were alleged to have voted that were dead. They did not vote, and they were either the same name or the person was not on the voter rolls.
Okay, and so that was actually caught and corrected?
Well, I'm not sure where the information came from. When we received those names, I don't know how people received this information. I believe it got it because somebody got an absentee application in the mail, and it was from a third-party group that sent it out, and they sent it based off some old list that this third-party group had. And so an absentee application went to those households where someone had died.
And how can we regulate the information that these third-party groups receive? Because it seems like they are literally putting out false information off of incorrect information that they are receiving or that they have.
Well, and I believe that Senate Bill 202, there is a section in there that addresses that very topic going forward. And I think that it should prevent it from happening in the future. That list is out there available on the Secretary of State's website. So any group can go on there and download that and parse that list themselves. If they have an old list or if they use one of their old mailing lists, I think SB 202 is going to have some enforcement action that's available in there to remedy that.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Mayor Bodker?
Mr. Barron, you talked about inactive versus active voters. Are the municipalities being charged on both, or are we only being charged on active voters?
You should only be charged on active voters.
And if I also understood you, due to the new way that we're being charged, is there a reconciliation that comes back, with the exception of the back office cost, and looks at the number of precincts that we have compared to our total cost to ensure that one municipality isn't covering the cost of another municipality's? Let's just say one municipality has a larger number of precincts, one municipality has a smaller number of precincts. That obviously has a direct impact on the cost.
We've what the resolution states is that it's $2.96 per registered voter. And that is just what the cost is. And it was wanted to put a flat fee in place.
All right. Anyone else? Further questions?
Mr. Chairman, Mayor Bodie.
Mayor Bodie, you have the floor.
Yes, to Vice Chairman Hall's point of third-party participation, this past election, I retrieved from my mailbox in front of my house a card addressed to the gentleman I bought the house from in 1990, notifying me that I needed to contact the election board, that they were trying to take my name off the list 30 years later. And I assure you that name had been off that list for a long time, because once it got to the city, we knew they had moved to Birmingham, Alabama, they were taking off of that. But that's a perfect example of a third party taking a list that was at least 30.
And I did just receive verification that Eva Galambos is not registered to vote in Fulton County.
Thanks. That's all I needed.
I hope not. Okay. Further questions? Anything else for Mr. Barron at this time? No, thank you, Mr. Barron. Next item, number 3, COVID-19 updates. Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir. The first part of this will be providing you an update on our vaccination efforts, and you will see that we're moving from the success that we've had at the big fixed sites to preparing for an intensive mobile delivery approach. Matt Kallmeyer, our emergency management director, and Doug Schuster, who works with the incident management firm that we contracted with, EMSI, will provide this overview. Matt?
Good morning. The line as well. We'll go ahead and get started. If we could just progress to the next slide, please. Thank you, moderator. Doug, why don't you kick us off?
All right. Good morning, mayors. A little bit of an update here from our vaccination response. We reached on Tuesday 450,000. We're actually up to 471,000 as of today. Also on Tuesday of this week, we started accepting walk-ups at both the North Point and GICC locations, as we have been doing at Mercedes-Benz for about 2 weeks. This week, we have 17,500 second dose appointments that are scheduled at our 3 fixed locations. Another milestone that was hit last week was we hit 25,000 vaccinations delivered by our mobile vaccine units, which is something we're proud of, and we intend on getting better. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the slide presentation. Also this week, we have 8 mobile units out in the field that will be at 30 unique locations. And that number will continue to grow as we shift from our mass vaccination sites to a more targeted approach with our mobile units. Next slide. This real quickly just shows us where we are. This was on Wednesday with the vaccinations by location. Like I said, we're well over 450,000, 471,000, and we're at 271,000 at Mercedes. We're getting close to 85,000 at North, and between the 3 sites we've been out in the South, we're closing in on 70,000 vaccines delivered. Next slide. Matt, back to you.
Thank you, Doug. So one of the things that we're very proud of is the amount of individuals that we've been able to vaccinate at all the locations that you heard of, over 450,000 that Doug just talked about. But we're also very proud of the fact that we've been able to vaccinate over, actually the number is 278,067 individuals at the Mercedes-Benz Community Vaccination Center. So that started in January 4th, all the way through now. Included inside there's the numbers that we did when it was just us and the Board of Health. And then when we did transition to the FEMA supported type 1 site, we've shared this in the past with you all. Just want to make sure that we could reiterate again, this site is actually operated by us. It is a local process. We are just receiving the financial support and federal support in the form of DoD personnel and some FEMA individuals to help with some registration and data entry. But at the end of the day, this is us at the local level making sure that we determine the success for the citizens that we serve, as well as for Metro Atlanta. So we did talk about walk-ups. We did combine walk-ups at this site to 1 gate now due to the reduced number of individuals that are coming to the location. We used to have that by gate 1. If you're familiar with the stadium, that is on the side that's closer to Northside Drive by the big soccer ball sculpture that is around the stadium. So now everyone just comes through 1 gate and we could properly distribute folks throughout the stadium. We're very proud to be able to have done 3 days during our operational period so far. We just entered week 7 through the Community Vaccination Center operation, where we've done over 10,000 individuals in 1 day. The most recent one was 12,726. Up to that point, we were the most productive vaccination center in all of the FEMA Type 1 sites in the country. There are 10 of those at our level. What does that mean? That's over 6,000 vaccines a day you have to be able to administer to get to that typing level. Type 2 is anything that's over 3,000. Type 1, at Type 3 was over 1,000. So we're very grateful once again to be having that ability to go ahead and vaccinate that many people in 1 day in Metro Atlanta. And, we have been referred to as the machine. So when the FEMA administrator came down, he toured the site. He went back to all of his headquarter folks in DC, as well as his other FEMA regional administrators, and he called us the machine, and he told folks this is the gold standard. The way that we operate, the way that we set up the process, and the things that we do to reach out to the community is something that they should be implementing in other parts of the country. So we're grateful for that as well. The amount of walk-ups we've been able to just accomplish at this site is well over 27,026 individuals. And their single highest day of walk-up total was 3,010. So that's one of the things that we've seen, is that as we start to see a reduction in the amount of individuals that want to take advantage of setting up appointments, we open up a walk-in process. It's a little bit easier for us at this site to be able to handle unknown of this capacity, because we had 5 pods that are operational in this one location. As you can see, 3,010 is a further north than any of the numbers we had at our north site and south site during our operation thus far. So been grateful to be able to do that as well. Regretfully, we are seeing a reduction in the amount of folks that are taking advantage of vaccination, and we'll talk a little bit about that through our presentation today. Next slide, please. Just wanted to go ahead and pause here and say thank you. Just thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't thank you guys enough. Your teams, you have went ahead and instructed your fire chiefs to give us personnel to help us in the vaccination effort. When I say us, I'm speaking for Dr. Paxson as well. When it comes to this process, we can't thank you guys enough for helping us get needles into arms of individuals that needed the vaccine most before we were able to bring any DoD resources in, before we were able to go ahead and hire temporary staff and such. It was because of the partnerships that we had with you, your cities, and your fire chiefs. And I just, once again, cannot thank you guys enough. Well over 1,289 man hours, personnel hours, is a more proper way of describing that, went into this particular effort. And I just can't go ahead and thank you guys enough. I also can't thank the mayor of College Park enough for her gracious offer for letting us use the GICC in this effort as well. So thank you for that, ma'am. Next
Mr.
slide.
Chair, this is Mayor Carhurst.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question concerning the public safety support. I know that the city of Fairburn has been very active with some of these sites, with taking some of our EMTs out. However, we're shown as 0. I just got off the phone with my fire chief, and he has confirmed that our EMTs have been at a lot of these sites volunteering. And I need to have our records, those records, to reflect our participation.
Okay, Mr. Colmeyer, did you get that?
Yes, sir. We'll work with the fire chief. These numbers are what we had in our file based upon the shifts that they signed up for, the 3 fixed vaccination sites that we operate. If that was some oversight, we'd be more than happy to go ahead and correct that. But once again, this is just based upon what we saw for the signups for those particular areas.
Mayor Holiday Ingram.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was getting ready to make a response and first ask a question as to whether or not, my understanding is that the CORE organization is a partnership with the county as well. Am I incorrect in that? The CORE vaccination, the vaccinations that are being done by CORE?
You're correct, ma'am. It is a partnership with us. Yes, ma'am.
Right. So we have 2 weekly sites in the city of East Point at Impact Church and our East Point First Malibu Church. And I actually received both of my doses, well, one in March and one in April. And so I echo the sentiments of Mayor Carhurst regarding the accuracy or the reflection of the actual collaboration that is happening, because our East Point firefighters are actually manning that Impact site every week and have been there since the beginning on March 25th. So
these numbers just reflect the volunteer effort at our fixed sites, and we can come back with numbers. Have to get with CORE for our mobile site usage. These are just at the 3 fixed sites where people had signed up for. So that's what this is.
right, and the sites, thank you for that. And the sites that I'm referring to aren't mobile; they're fixed locations every week. I guess maybe that's how you're characterizing the other sites as mobile sites, but these are 2 churches, permanent structures that are ongoing weekly. But
that's considered a mobile site in our definition, ma'am. So if it's not habitual ongoing Monday through Tuesday through Saturday, like we do at the Georgia National Convention Center. We consider we have 3 fixed sites in our operational footprint: GICC, Mercedes-Benz, and 4700 North Point. Anything else is considered a mobile operation because it is not fixed. The information, the resources are broken down, picked up, and taken to another site to go ahead and operate, and then we circle back to that location. But to Doug's point, we'll definitely try to capture our mobile efforts and what everyone has done to go ahead and support that and make sure everyone gets acknowledgement for that.
I look forward to seeing and capturing, you guys capturing that mobile data. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Motley Broom.
Yes, I just wanted to say certainly appreciate all the efforts that the county has put forth in this, and we have been a willing partner, and we are thrilled that we're over 50,000 doses at the GICC. We had a conversation this Monday at our council meeting about walk-up appointments. Didn't realize that the GICC is now doing those. So if you could just make sure that we're getting that information directly so we can share it with the public. I was looking at the social media page of the Board of Health, and I see that it was posted there. It just didn't hit my feed, but I would love to share that information with folks and have the most up-to-date information possible.
Will do, ma'am.
Okay, continue.
Next slide, please. Doug?
All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about our health equity response. And we got a couple bullets here. First, dealing with ensuring that we have access to the demographic information from all sources. Since we've started, as you well know, we've had different ways to register through the state, different ways to register through the county, through CORE, and just collecting all the information to ensure that we have the best data that we can get. And data has been hard to get for a lot of reasons. So the effort, that it seems like a pretty innocuous bullet, but the effort to kind of gather information when we are doing thousands of vaccines per day is a big effort, and there's a lot of work for people that have done that. So we get better information, we get better at it every day. We have a multi-pronged strategy that we're going to talk about a little bit here, and then we're going to continue to increase the county's mobile units from 8 to 11 by the end of May. And like I said, just be better. I think we got really good, as Matt has told you about, at our 3 fixed sites. We have 2 type 3 sites and the type 1 site at Mercedes-Benz. And we really got good at that, and it was probably smart to do that to get as many people as we can. We're to the point now where we have vaccinated most of the willing people, and that was the most efficient way to do it. And so mobile improvement and understanding how to make these sites better, and partnership with people like the mayors to get us to get the message out that how important vaccines work. I actually was sifting through data today and found some really good empirical evidence that vaccines work. So in Fulton County, over 80% of our population over 55 have been vaccinated. And the new hospital data shows the lowest total ever for that age group being admitted to the hospitals in the county. Like they're at a normal rate now for that age group. And the highest age group being admitted to the hospitals are the 20 to 30-year-olds, which does not make sense at all unless you're factoring in that they're the lowest population being vaccinated. And so we're going to talk a lot about racial demographics, but the younger demographic is very important too across all races. So we need your all's help. Next, and
stop right there. Mayor Motley Broom.
Yes.
Two questions. What is the overall, approximation of the percentage of the county that has been vaccinated thus far? And I know last month we discussed those mobile units that had the ability to accommodate non-native English speakers. And so I was curious, as the mobile units, the number of mobile units expands, what the plan is in terms of identifying populations and getting mobile units to those populations that are not native English speakers?
So core, depending on when they're doing their setting up, and we're going to do a whole presentation on the mobile units here in a second, a couple slides, but core, depending as they're setting it up, will look at the neighborhoods that they're going in and staff their people with multilingual. We also have the ability to use some other translation services, but if they're going into a particular neighborhood, they have a group to pull from that they'll make sure that they have the bilingual capability. And then the state dashboard is reporting, I'm pulling it up right now. We're for Fulton County that 38% of people in the county have had at least one dose. But that is against total population. We're closer to 47% if you use the total eligible people in the county. So the state only total population. And then the other factor that leads me to believe that we're even much higher than that is incomplete data in GRITS and lag of entry of GRITS information. So we know that there's plenty of work to be done. As a matter of fact, we hope to be caught up on our GRITS entry by the middle of next week, which should push those numbers up higher. But like I said, over 65 is about 85%, and the 20 to 34% is about 25% of those population, and that's really from the age demographic is where we're hurting the most.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay. One, is there a way for people who have received a full course of vaccination to confirm that their information has been entered into the appropriate system? And two, when you say the total population is being taken into account, we're talking about even children who are not eligible for vaccines yet. So, okay. So I can understand why you think it's higher. All right.
All right, Mayor Paul.
Wait, I did have that first
I'd like to answer
question.
her question regarding if someone would like to check their vaccine. That would be through the Board of Health. They have the ability to check in through the VRAS system. So if they could contact the clinic that is closest to them, those individuals there, ma'am, can actually do a GRITS query to be able to go ahead and check the status of that individual in the system.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor Paul.
Yeah, question. I anecdotally, I know a number of people have gone to other jurisdictions. I've talked to people who've gone to Dalton, to Macon, as far away as Valdosta from Fulton County. Does the system, if they've driven out of the Fulton jurisdiction, does the system record them as a Fulton County inoculee, or is it in Whitfield or Bibb or Lowndes County?
That's a great question, Mayor. The state dashboard used to say where the vaccine was delivered. Now the dashboard reports the zip code of where the person lives who received the vaccine. So if somebody from Fulton County got vaccinated elsewhere, it would show as a Fulton County, and vice versa. If you came from someplace to Fulton, the problem with that is they've got about 20% of all the GRITS entries don't have zip code information. And so those people are being shown in the state's total, but not in the county's total. So like I said, the state dashboard's getting better every day, but there are some problems, not problems, but there are some anomalies that we're trying to fix and gather. And the GRITS system is antiquated, was built in 1994. And so we're just trying that each county is feverishly validating their GRITS information right now. It's not just a Fulton County problem. So as that information gets better, we'll have better numbers.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who, there was a lot of conversation on social media about, well, I got my shot in this town because I couldn't get an appointment in Fulton County. So I think you'll find a lot of people from Fulton County and maybe some other Metro Atlanta jurisdictions have gone to other areas to get inoculated that may or may not be in the system.
Yeah, I will just say when we're doing, not just us, but when people are doing thousands per day, the paperwork portion was not perfect. And now that we've got some time, every county's trying to get better at that, sir.
Okay, so let's kind of speed up a little bit. We have two very important sections left. Continue, Mr. Calmeyer, Mr. Schuster.
Next slide, please.
So I talked about age. Now I'd like to talk about racial distribution. What you see in front of you, the blue is the percent of population, just the percent of population of each race grouping that you see. The orange is the percent of vaccine that was delivered that by us on February 23rd. And the gray is the percent of vaccine delivered to that racial distribution on April 23rd. So 2-month gap. And then the yellow is what we've done at the community vaccination site at Mercedes-Benz. So all of our efforts to try and have equitable distribution, you're going to see kind of what the payoff is. So with the white group, you can see that 50% in February, 51 in April, and at Mercedes-Benz, 47% through the building. The black group, 13% in February, and that number jumped 7 percentage points. And to get it to jump 7 percentage points means we're seeing a much higher ratio over that 2-month period. We are nowhere near where we need to be in that group, but it is an improvement. And a big part of that, as you can see, is the Mercedes-Benz Community Vaccination Center, plus the mobile solutions that Matt's going to talk about here in a second. What you can glean from the Asian population is that they got vaccinated very early at a higher percent than their population, and now they're back down to what their demographic is, but also a high number through the center. One of the things we're really proud of is in February, we were less than 1% with the Latino community, and now we're at 9%. And in the last couple of weeks, we've been 15, 16% through the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So we took that number to above their percentage of the population. And then as you can see, our unknowns and collecting the data has gotten better as time goes on, and we hope to see improvements in that area. Next slide. We've talked about this before. I'm going to run through this, but we've worked with the senior centers in the community and, faith-based leaders with mobile vaccination units and plans for them to put stuff in the church bulletins and help with transportation. And then the Latinx outreach, going to the Mexican consulate and communities, working with the soccer team here in Mercedes-Benz has produced just unbelievable results. And then our partnership to get into long-term care facilities has been unbelievable. And we continue to improve our street team game, knocking on doors and getting people registered whatever way we can. Next slide. Jessica, you want to talk about this?
Thank you very much, Doug. And I'm here with the chairman and team. So mayors and commissioners, the commissioners have heard about this. We are doing outreach at the Fulton County libraries, as well as tag offices and community-based events. If you have events where you'd like a street team to be there and have information about the vaccine, we are trying to cover as many locations as possible. This is just an example of the setup that you will see at the libraries. We are very excited to announce that coming very soon, we will actually be offering vaccination at libraries on a rotating basis, particularly those communities that have been identified as more vulnerable or having gaps in access. So our overall goal with this outreach is to close the gap in the racial disparities that Doug just provided. Next slide, please. Before we go into mobile vaccination, I wanted to give one other update about outreach. We are now at a place where we are able to work with community organizations that want to offer or host a vaccination event. And essentially what we would ask them to do is to commit to providing at least 50 vaccination bookings. We would do that at one of these fixed locations. During those operating hours, they would have a block of time. We would provide them with a flyer and things like that. So if you are aware, this is to supplement or especially for organizations where a mobile solution isn't going to work well. So this is something we're very excited about, and we will be providing information to all of you in case there's an organization you know that would like to host a vaccination event at one of our fixed sites.
Thank you, Jessica. And the final piece we just discussed today, once again, is the mobile vaccination. So it is definitely, if we go back one slide, please, moderator. But this progression has gone from, once again, having limited supplies of vaccines, trying to set up some fixed sites to bring people to come to it. We've achieved that mission. We've continued to go ahead and vaccinate large amounts of individuals that we told you guys about today, of the individuals that want the vaccine, the people that are actually seeking it out. And now we're getting to the next frontier. While we did start mobile vaccination efforts early on, we see that the future is actually increasing the amount of mobile vaccination programs that we do have. So just to let you guys know, we have in place 10 mobile resources through CORE, as well as one resource through our partners in the Board of Health, which gives us a total allocation of 11 mobile units that will be deployed within our jurisdiction. The capacity is up to about 2,000 individuals per day, that we'll be able to vaccinate with this solution. And so very scalable, very different opportunities with it. It's not a fixed one-size-fits-all program. Just to give you guys an idea, we have 3 types of vaccination, mobile vaccination programs that we can do. One's a micro, which is up to 100 individuals per day we vaccinate. One's a lean unit, which is 200 individuals today. Then a full mobile vaccination team is 400 individuals that we can vaccinate in a day. Next slide, please. So we talked about that 3-pronged approach. When we came to you all in the beginning, we were looking at the fact that how do we do this with not only ourselves, meaning the Board of Health and Emergency Management, get out into the community and start the vaccination process, work with the second pillar inside there, which is our healthcare partners, the hospitals. And the third piece was our private sector partners, the pharmacies, the grocery stores, so on and so forth, to get that out and see if we could leverage those as well. We've achieved our goal. We have vaccinated well over a third of the population that we were hoping to do well ahead of time. You heard that statistic today, as well as that achievement, and we're not stopping. That's the beautiful thing about that. So our mobile vaccination strategies you see there is bridging the equity gaps. We talked to you a little about today about equity. We want to bring the fight to the community. We want to bring this to the places where citizens do not have the ability to get out of an apartment complex, do not have access to mass transit, have other limitations, whether they may be just not able to take the time to go out there because they're working 2 or 3 jobs or have family issues. But if we bring it into an apartment complex, we bring it into a church, we bring it into some other community location that they can pop in, pop back out and get back to life. That's what we want to be able to go ahead and do. And we know this is the new frontier. Access, once again, working with well over 100 community-based partnerships, over 300 faith-based partners as well. Anything that we can do to go ahead and continue to vaccinate. Ms. Corbett told you today about what we're doing at the libraries, layering that over with CDC tracks of areas where we're seeing that we're not having large amounts of people that are taking the vaccine. Those are the type of things we wanted to use with this. Once again, it's a surgical approach, not a big tool, very fine scalpel to go ahead and address an issue. And the one thing is pivoting. We talked about that today. A lot of effort and emphasis that went into that fixed site location. We're starting to wind down on that. We'll be right sizing our fixing locations, increasing the amount of walk-ups that we have at those sites. Should people want to just pop on in, driving by, say, hey, it's a good day, let me get vaccinated. We'll want to continue to go ahead and leverage that effort, but at the same time, really doubling, tripling down on our mobile vaccination program. Next slide, and that'll be the last slide. Just want to give you guys a kind of an update of the associated costs with this. Doug, roll us out of here.
Ready to get off mute. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, just to show, as Matt talked about, the lean units and the micro units. And I just want to stress that we can, based on our scheduling and talking to the hosts, put the right size tool for the job, because we also have to be conscious of vaccine cold chain storage. And so really we can build the right size unit to come to your function or to your location to make it right. And then you have the launch dates on the right and really the capabilities that we can do. And we can do up to 2,000 vaccines a day. And like I said, our goal is to get better at this every day and to make sure that we're hitting the neighborhoods, communities, and events that we need to be at. And so we have last point is we have a vaccine equity team that meets 2 to 3 times a week. And we put a lot of effort into improving our processes to get better at this. I think we're open for questions at this time.
Before I turn it back over to the chairman, we just can't do this without you all, folks. If you know places in your community, you know of apartment complexes, you know of congregations, anything you can do to help us to get in front of our team to be able to schedule this, I welcome that. I am asking you for that. Help us find these areas in your community that we can help get more people vaccinated so that we can stop the variants that are occurring in our community. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity.
All right, any questions? None. All right, let's.
Anna Roach.
All right, Madam COO, are you ready for us now?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of our mayor. Are we on mute still?
No. No.
Can you all hear? Oh, okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and mayors of Fulton. I do have, next slide, please, 2 slides. Thank you. We do have just a few slides here. We limited the number of slides in this presentation because we provide information about the progress on our emergency rental assistance program in our transparency website online. So it's accessible not just to you mayors and commissioners, but also to our public at large. These are large numbers at the top of this slide, but quite frankly, as we received these applications and did our mass denials of the city of Atlanta and outside of our jurisdictions, we're now looking at a more manageable number to adjudicate. One of the other things we talked about earlier as well are the challenges around case managing applicants through the application and the somewhat unexpected challenges that we got into in terms of applications having mismatched names on the lease, et cetera. And so one of the things that we did to address that issue is engage a firm called P&N to come in and augment the staff that we had to help us work through those applications and get them to the point where we can both adjudicate and approve them quicker than we have been able to do so in the past. So we're very excited to have them on board. They started yesterday, and we're looking forward to at a much more exponentially efficient rate, go through these applications. The one other thing I'd like to mention before we move on to the slide itself and the next slide is that we're in constant communication with our partners who have also been direct recipients of ERAP, as well as the state. We have a regional call. In fact, it's this afternoon at 2 o'clock is the next one. And we're also in constant communication with the state. And they have indicated that since we are so far along in our process, they're actually ready to engage with Fulton County to open up the state's portal for applicants that are in our funding jurisdiction. So very excited about starting that conversation with the state as well. Next slide. Commissioners, this slide is one maintained by our finance department that shows the tracking of the $18 million that was received. As you can see, of the applications that have been approved, we have expended approximately $700,000 paying for both rental and utility assistance. That's $665,000 in rental and about $42,000 in utility. We maintain this information as a part of our financial tracking of our COVID related expenses as well. Next slide. Just a reminder and to share with the public that's watching as well as as well as the mayors, that all of the information concerning progress on the program, as well as information by city, can be found on our public transparency website at this link, which I can also provide in the chat area if anybody wants to copy and paste it. So making ourselves available for question was the best use we thought of this time. So Mr. Chairman, next slide, if we could, I'm sorry, go back one slide. I thought we had a question slide in there. We're prepared to take questions. Dr. Rochelle, who runs the program day to day with her team, is also here if more detail is requested than I have on hand.
Are there any questions regarding the rental assistance program? Who? Mayor Motley Broom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Roach, so at this point, applications are no longer being accepted. Is that correct?
Not at this point. We are going to be opening our application portal when we receive the second tranche of emergency rental assistance funds.
Do you have a sense of how, now that you've gotten a partner to assist with some of the challenges that you faced with the applications, how quickly you'll actually be dispersing the funds?
No, I do appreciate that question, Mayor Motley Broom, because that's a question I have in my own mind to be able to calculate an execution rate to report both to our Board of Commissioners as well to this body. I would like the opportunity to get the firm working on those applications so that we can see what our rate will be. And I will be better prepared to answer this question at our next meeting because they just started working yesterday. I'll also say, in addition to the augmentation of our resources, I plan to walk through the actual process as well as work with our law department to see if there is anything that is unnecessary or that we could do on the back end instead, that we could eliminate from the approval process. And the reason why that will be important is that if we bring on these resources and set them on top of our existing process, which is creating the delay, they may be delayed. No matter how many people you put at it, if the process is an issue, that needs to be addressed. And so I will be working with the county attorney's office, the county auditor's office, as well as the finance department to see if there are any layers that we could eliminate as a part of our approval process without putting our compliance at risk.
I know that, frankly, and I don't mean this in any sort of negative way. I fully expected these issues because they're the ones that we've seen in our own experience trying to administer the CDBG funds that we received for utility assistance. I mean, the challenges, and I think I talked about them either last month or a couple of months ago with the process itself. So, if there are ways in which you see opportunities to streamline the process or ways in which we might be able to eliminate some of the hoops that people have to go through, I'd love to know that. And I hope you keep the lines of communication open because we've certainly seen challenges as well, just getting people through the process. Do you envision more one-on-one assistance for folks?
I would say that in the vast majority of our applications, there is a lot of one-on-one assistance. And to our surprise, I think we've had to do case management work on a greater percentage of the applications than we originally anticipated. I do want to make the point again that because we're in constant communication with our direct recipient partners, we've also heard stories from them like you, Mayor Motley Broom, that this difficulty getting through the application process is not unique to Fulton County. It's not an excuse because people are hurting and we want to get them the funding as quickly as possible. One of the things that Commissioner Ellis recommended at the board meeting on Wednesday that I think that we're going to be sort of quick to figure out how to take advantage of is some regional statement to Treasury about how the guidelines, or HUD, about how the guidelines are a barrier to getting the funding to constituents as soon as possible. So on our regional call this afternoon, I plan to bring that up, and hopefully through either ARC or the state, we'll coordinate a regional statement of the impact of the guidelines on our ability to execute the funds as well. So I will keep you posted on that, the progress on that as well.
I appreciate it. And we've been sort of keeping track of some of the major barriers that we've had as well. And so if you're interested in that, I can pass on that information to you.
Absolutely. I will touch base with you offline, Mayor.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone else at this time? All right, continue, Madam COO.
At this point, I'd like to turn it over to the CFO to go over our recovery funds planning that she and the finance department have worked on.
Thank you, Anna. Next slide, please. Good afternoon, commissioners and mayors. Sharon Whitmore, Chief Financial Officer for the county. I have a few slides to share with you. These are slides that we have presented over the last several board meetings to the Board of Commissioners, specifically around the fiscal recovery funds that are part of the American Rescue Plan Act. Just quickly to cover the allowable uses of the funds. The funds can be used to respond to the public health emergency with respect to the COVID-19 or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or to aid impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. The funds can be used to provide a premium pay plan to eligible workers. In this case, we have of the county, but it could also be of the municipality as well, where they are performing essential work or providing grants to eligible employees that have eligible workers who are performing essential work. In this particular section, it's up to the Chief Executive Officer to define the eligible workers, and continuity of operations is included in the characterization of what would be considered for an eligible worker. The third item is the funds are provided for the provision of government services to the extent that the reduction in revenue, that there was a reduction in revenue due to the public health emergency relative to the revenues collected in the most full fiscal year prior to the emergency. And the date was January 20th, 2020. And then the last primary allowable use that the Act cites is to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Next slide, please. The Act specifically also identified some items where, or areas where you could not use the funds. That includes using the funds to directly or indirectly offset a reduction of net tax revenue. It also stated that the funds could not be deposited into a pension fund. It also stated that state and local governments are allowed to transfer to a private nonprofit organization, a public benefit corporation involved in the transportation of passengers or cargo, or a special purpose unit of state and local government. If any local government fails to comply with the Act, then there is a requirement that you repay the funds to Treasury. And then one of the items that we had highlighted previously to our board was that the definition of premium pay was identified as an amount, an additional amount of pay up to $13 per hour that can be paid to an eligible worker, and that there was a cap of $25,000 for any single eligible worker. Next slide, please. The funds are expected to be received in two different tranches, 50% in 2021, 60 days after the date of enactment, and 50% no earlier than 12 months from the date of first payment. The spending deadline has been identified in the Act as December 31st, 2024. And the reporting requirements that were included indicated that the Treasury Department would require periodic reports until the funds are fully expended, and that those reports would require you to report how the funds are used and how tax revenue was modified. And again, reiterating that non-compliance would result in repayment to the U.S. Treasury. Subsequent to the act itself being released, the Treasury Department has released some preliminary guidance for entities to prepare to receive the funds. We are still awaiting the full guidance for how the funds can fully be utilized, any FAQs that Treasury may be working on. But in the interim, they advise that entities should go ahead and ensure that you have a DUNS number, ensure that you've registered with SAMS.gov, and make sure that you gather all of your relative payment information, your EIN number, the name and contact of your authorized representative, and your financial institution information. Next slide, please. With respect to the total amount of fiscal recovery funds that are expected to be awarded to the county and its municipalities, based on the preliminary estimates that have been provided through several professional organizations, including GFOA and NACO. We've identified an estimated $538 million infusion into Fulton County as a whole over the next several years. This would be the total amount of funds that would come into the county. $206 million of that would come directly to Fulton County government, with 331.7 estimated to come to the cities within the county. Next slide, please. This slide was prepared from information that was provided specifically through the Government Finance Officers Association. These are estimates of the expected allocations of the local fiscal recovery funds by city. Again, the county at $206 million. The cities that were identified as entitlement cities are at $207 million, with Atlanta receiving the majority of that at $178.4. And then each of the other cities are shown as well. And those cities collectively would receive $124 million. And again, these are estimates, and the source was the Government Finance Officers Association. Next slide, please. So when we originally presented this information to our Board of Commissioners, we talked about how the county would begin to develop some recommended use cases for the funds that we expect to receive. And we looked at it from the approach that the county would look to focus its efforts and its spending on those areas that we are already providing countywide services, such as continuing to support the Board of Health in their effort to provide a vaccination and continued testing program, as well as things like addressing the court backlog that has accrued during the last 12 months while the courts have not been in full operation. And then that we would work and coordinate with our city partners for the cities to be able to focus on those things that are special and unique to each of your municipalities, and to address the community needs within your municipalities. Next slide, please. So to that end, the county management team has developed and presented to the board some preliminary use case recommendations. We did this around very similar to the manner in which we planned the CARES Act funds, looking at kind of a three-pronged approach, having a health response, operational stability, and community needs. So within the health response, the four primary use case scenarios that we've prepared in that area are, again, the vaccination support, We identified the support of the MBS mega site and included it in our health response, as well as the communications plan and program that we've developed to try to help inform our communities about the vaccination and try to really address the vaccine equity and the health equity issues around the vaccination program. And then lastly, funding to build out and support a stronger health infrastructure, particularly in the behavioral health area. In the operational stability area, we identified several potential uses, including pandemic proofing of county facilities, a premium pay program for county employees, a significant multi-year court backlog project in order to eliminate the backlog that has accrued within the court system. And then some information technology investments in order to expand our virtual and digital business offerings, as well as to be able to continue to support hybrid workforce that will, a portion of which of our workforce will remain remote. And then lastly, we had some items from 2020 that were encumbered where we did not receive the goods or services by the end of the year. We carried those encumbrances forward to 2021 that we would also offset in this area. And then lastly, under the community needs priority area, we identified many areas in which we could make investments with these resources to address community needs, including the rental assistance program, safety net services, which the board has already taken an action on, authorizing the use of our local fiscal recovery funds to completely fund the applications that were received this year under our community services program. We've also made a recommendation for a mortgage assistance program, the establishment of a long-term revolving loan program, an artist grant program, a small business grant program, some funding to address food insecurity and to be able to perhaps provide some coordination around addressing food insecurity across the county, an adult job training program, as well as a summer youth job training program. And so those are the preliminary use case scenarios that have been presented to the Board of Commissioners from management around how the county could potentially use the fiscal recovery funds. Next slide, please.
I have a question on that slide. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I ask?
Yes.
Before we keep, okay. Yeah. Since I'm not as familiar with your budget as you are, what are these 2020 obligations you're referring to? That's the first question.
At the end of 2020, we had a number of procurement items, particularly around PPE, where we had been able to secure allotments for masks and gloves and various PPE requirements, part of which is what's going into the 4,700 warehouse. And because we hadn't received, we had the purchase orders in place, but we had not received the goods, we went ahead and re-encumbered those funds, and we programmed for them out of our general fund budget. So we have actually provided the funding for that out of our general fund budget. And we did at the beginning of 2020 set aside $45.7 million that we have been spending in order to support our continued efforts to respond to the pandemic, primarily the vaccination program that has been underway since January and the vaccination and testing programs that have been underway since January have been supported out of the what we call the Emergency Reserve Response Fund that was set aside specifically to address the continued response to the pandemic. So this list of items here are funded. The amounts that we've recommended are funded partially from both our Emergency Reserve Response Fund and the fiscal recovery funds. And then a portion of these we will also seek FEMA reimbursement on. But if we are not successful in seeking the FEMA reimbursement, we would have the resources on reserve or in contingency to cover the costs that have already been incurred and that we will continue to incur until it's determined that we no longer need to support a vaccination program.
Okay. And second question, and I believe it's my last question. In regard to the community needs, would these be following the same guidelines as the CARES Act funding in that these programs would be for residents of Fulton County living outside the city of Atlanta, or would it be for all of the county residents?
The rental assistance item is what is funded with the ERAP funds, both 1 and 2. So rental assistance would be outside for Fulton County residents outside the city of Atlanta. Everything else on the list, we have not yet made any decision on whether it would be just inside or outside. Again, since all of the cities are receiving funds under the local fiscal recovery section of the American Rescue Plan, I don't think that the same limitation is placed on where the county can spend the local fiscal recovery funds.
Thank you.
Mayor Holiday Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on Mayor Motley Broom's question, I was going to ask about that as well. Has it been determined how much or estimated as to how much will be allocated for each category under the community needs section?
We've made a preliminary recommendation. The Board of Commissioners has not taken a final position on that yet. So at this point in time, I would say that we don't have a final dollar amount for each.
When you say made a preliminary recommendation, was that at a board meeting or is that internal discussion that you guys are having before the public discussion?
We did a full review of each of these recommendations with the board at our first meeting in April. And we presented a use case scenario for each of them. After that meeting, we did make some changes to the recommendations. So after that meeting is when we proposed the artist grant program, the small business grant program, and the summer youth job training program. But we did make a full presentation with use case slides for each of these items at our first meeting in April.
And when you say use case slides, you're referring to the amount per category?
Yes, and a general description of the program. And in some cases, for example, in the court backlog, we had a small presentation around the court backlog project. But for each of the use cases, we had a slide describing what the use case was for, and the rationale was for each of the recommendations.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Chairman, is it possible for that presentation to be emailed to us?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Abdul Rahman.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize. I'm having a little technical difficulty, so I want to kind of get this out. I was wondering if the mayors would be interested in us doing something from a collaborative effort, since we do have the infrastructure in place as far as administering the rental funds and the mortgage funds and any other prospect that they would have on mind, but I'm speaking just to that because we already have the infrastructure in place. And if the mayors wanted to do something from a collaborative perspective to streamline it and make it easier and more cost effective, I think that would be great. I just wanted to kind of get a preliminary idea from the mayors if they thought that would be good for us to maybe try to at least do that from a collaborative. It's other things that we may want to collaborate on, but because of the amount of money and the need, I think it would be in the best interest if Fulton County, because we have the infrastructure, could take the lead on that. And of course, Sharon and the others, you all are the number crunchers as to how it would benefit us all. But just looking at it from as a sitting commissioner, I know that there probably would be a reduced rate with the vendor or a reduced rate and or quicker time in implementing to helping those who really had a need. So I just wanted to, bring that out here today so I can get an idea of the mayors that would be interested in using what we already have in place for a collaborative effort for that. Thank you.
One brief comment. I think overlapping here is of some concern. I think we will need to address that. The lineup going forward here will be Mayor Holiday Ingram, followed by Commissioner Hausman and Mayor Mike Bodker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner Abdul-Rahman, for bringing that up. I think it's critically important that we explore all opportunities to collaborate and coordinate. These funds are, even though this is the first time we received direct funding at the municipal level, we want to make sure that we are leveraging them and using them as efficiently as possible to meet the most needs. And with the federal government also having federal programs that kind of address some of these community needs, and then there's the funding that the county will have as well as the cities, I think collaboration and coordination is critically important to avoid at minimum duplication of efforts and possibly even triplication of efforts if the federal funding is being used for some of these categories and ways. And so we had talked about that at our agenda meeting with Commissioner Abdul-Rahman, Commissioner Hausman, and Vice Chair Hall about really trying to see how this might be an opportunity, as Commissioner Abdul-Rahman said, to collaborate, coordinate, and you can reframe the level of partnership or working together of the cities with the county to really do what it is that we all have the goal to do, and that is meet the needs and bridge the gaps for the residents within our community. And so I think it is absolutely a great opportunity to collaborate and coordinate. I'm definitely willing and continue to have those conversations to identify those areas within the community needs or others where we might be able to, again, to collaborate to prevent duplication or even triplication of supports and resources, given the different varied needs that each of the cities has and the potential use for the American Rescue Plan Fund. So again, thank you, Commissioner Abdul-Rahman.
All right, thank you, Mayor Holiday Ingram. Commissioner Hausman, followed by Mayor Bodker, and it's about noon, but let's continue.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, for those comments. I agree. We all agreed during our agenda call that we would best serve our communities if we work together wherever possible. And you've heard from us today what we are preliminarily thinking about or our focus areas. I might want to say that recently we have also talked a little bit about the issue of broadband coverage. And there are pockets throughout Fulton County that do not have adequate broadband coverage. And we've seen the impacts of that with school kids and trying to do their work and people trying to work at home. So that may be another area that we should also focus on with our funds. But I think it would be helpful for us to understand what city priorities are. And I know there's 15 of y'all, and certainly don't think we have time for that today, but it would probably be helpful for us as we work towards collaboration to see what your focuses are, what your priorities are from the city level, so we can really start talking about specifics of how we collaborate. Thank you.
Mayor Bodker.
First, to both of our commissioners that recently spoke, I want to thank you for the collaborative effort. It is obvious, Mr. Chairman, from today's presentation that we're not going to make the mistakes that we did early on in the CARES program, and I know that's appreciated by me and my fellow colleague mayors. I also want to say that while on the individual item that we talked about with the rental assistance, we've been using not-for-profits in our area for that, and it's worked quite effectively. So I'm not sure whether Johns Creek would want to move forward completely at a county level, but I think there's plenty of opportunity for us to organize. And as Commissioner Hausman said, I think the first step in that is for the cities to decide where they think categorically they're going to make their efforts so that we can match that up against the county and see where we have the overlap and the opportunity to get economies of scale. And so I look forward to that. I want to thank you overall for today's meeting. I thought it was a much better meeting than those of the past. I appreciate you responding to the agenda committee's request. And I look forward to us continuing throughout the year and throughout the rest of the pandemic to do all that we can to help our mutual citizens.
Thank you so much, Mayor Bodker. Any closing comments from anyone else?
I just want to say this was one of the most refreshing meetings that we have had. We got a lot of information shared, but also a lot of proactive things that we all know that we collectively need to do. I do want to thank the commissioners for the offer of working even deeper as it relates to how we're getting resources to our communities, because some of our cities, we don't have the access to certain nonprofits that have been assisting in any way, as Johns Creek just recently spoke of. But certainly, I'd love to have a conversation with the county on how we can collectively do something positive. But thanks again for a great meeting. I really appreciate it. I'm leaving the meeting without a headache, leaving the meeting without sweating, leaving the meeting without having an ulcer. Thank you. I love you.
Commissioner Hall.
I'm sorry. Yes, Mayor Williams. I almost forgot what I was going to say. I want to just thank the ladies, my colleagues, Commissioner Khadijah Abdul Rahman. Thank you for bringing up what we discussed about collaboration with the cities. Thank you, Commissioner Liz Hausman, and thank you, Mayor Dina Ingram. We had an awesome agenda setting meeting. I think it was one of the best ones we've ever had. And so it just shows ladies are doing it.
Mayor Holiday Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was going to actually comment on that as well, Vice Chair Hall, but I must give Mayor Bodker, the male on the committee, kudos for coordinating and setting the calendaring our agenda meetings so that we make sure that they're on the calendar. So he got us in line and on schedule. But I echo those sentiments. We really did have a great meeting. I enjoyed the time with Commissioner Hausman, Commissioner Abdul Rahman, and Vice Chair Hall with our agenda planning committee, and look forward to the future ones. I think what we shared as a committee of recommending what was on the agenda, I appreciated actually making it, and also appreciate the comprehensive nature of the presentations that were shared to address what was on the agenda. So I think we're on to something good, and I look forward to it continuing.
Anyone else? All right, no further comments, and without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.